A dedicated black woman asked a simple question: why was I passed over? What followed exposed more than bias. It revealed how silence in the face of injustice can speak louder than any words. Ava Johnson had been with Lyndale Finance for almost a decade. She had entered the firm as a wide-eyed young woman, eager to prove herself in an industry where every promotion seemed like an uphill battle. Over the years, she'd worked tirelessly to earn her spot, pulling long nights, building relationships with clients, and achieving goals others deemed impossible. But now, as she stood in the company's sleek, glass-walled conference room, a wave of disbelief washed over her. She had worked for this moment, and yet it was slipping through her fingers. The news of Jacob Green's promotion hit like a ton of bricks. Ava had been with the firm longer than Jacob had even been employed there. She was the highest performing senior associate in the department, praised consistently for her attention to detail, leadership skills, and ability to handle complex, high-profile clients. Jacob, on the other hand, had barely scratched the surface of what it meant to lead. His work was solid but unremarkable, and he certainly hadn't demonstrated the leadership Ava had. Yet, here he was, promoted to a senior management position that Ava had been eyeing for months. Her mind raced as she tried to process what had just been announced. The HR representative, Samantha Barlow, smiled as she read off Jacob's name, nodding to him as if the decision had been anything but inevitable. The smile on Jacob's face, full of pride and excitement, didn't help. Ava tried to keep her expression neutral, but inside, she felt the sting of betrayal. She had earned this. She had worked harder than anyone else. And now this? "Thank you for your continued efforts, everyone," Samantha said, unaware of the fire brewing beneath Ava's surface. "We're excited about the future and the leadership Jacob will bring to the team." Ava's heart pounded as she sat back in her chair, trying to hold it together. This wasn't how it was supposed to happen. Jacob wasn't unqualified. He simply wasn't qualified enough, not compared to her. As the meeting ended, Ava stayed seated while her colleagues buzzed with excitement, congratulating Jacob. Her mind swirled with questions. Was it really merit-based? Or had her race played a role in this decision? She had heard the whispers, the subtle remarks from a few colleagues who didn't even realize they were reinforcing stereotypes, the subtle biases, the way the good old boys network operated, despite efforts to change it. This wasn't the first time Ava had been overlooked for something she deserved, but it was the first time it felt so blatant. Ava wasn't one to let things slide. She never had been. But today felt different. It wasn't just about the promotion anymore. It was about proving a point. As the elevator doors closed behind her, Ava stepped inside. The steel hum of the elevator filled the silence, and she glanced at her reflection in the mirrored wall. Her face looked composed, but inside, her thoughts were racing. She knew she had to act. The more she thought about Jacob's promotion, the clearer it became. This wasn't just an isolated incident. It was the latest in a series of decisions she'd witnessed that seemed, in her gut, to be driven by factors other than merit. She pressed the button for the ground floor but remained standing, not ready to face what lay below, not yet ready to confront the people she'd trusted for so long. Instead, her thoughts turned inward. Her success at the company had always been a double-edged sword. She had spent years meticulously building her career, often going the extra mile to prove herself. She had worked through the long nights, sacrificing her personal time for the company's demands. Every success, every project that went above and beyond expectations had earned her more respect, but at what cost? And now, here she was, passed over. Again. The elevator arrived at the lobby, but Ava remained rooted in place. She wasn't sure what to do next. She could let it go and move on, or she could confront them. The weight of the decision pressed down on her chest, but something deep inside told her she couldn't stay silent. She was used to fighting for what was right, even when the odds seemed stacked against her. She was no stranger to hard work, but now it was about more than just being good enough. It was about fairness. After stepping out of the elevator, Ava walked briskly to her desk, her mind already working through the steps. She could feel the weight of what was to come, but there was no turning back now. She'd been passed over for too long. This time, it wasn't just about the promotion. It was about the larger truth that she had been fighting against in every corner of her career. The next day, she sought out her manager, Gordon Matthews, hoping to get some clarity. Gordon had been her direct supervisor for years, someone she had trusted, someone who had once spoken highly of her abilities. His office was quiet when she arrived. He looked up at her with a warm smile, inviting her to sit. But Ava wasn't in the mood for pleasantries. She had to know the truth. "Gordon," she began, her voice steady but firm. "Jacob got the promotion. How is that possible?" Gordon raised his eyebrows in surprise. "Ava, hey, what's up?" "I'm asking you," she said, not bothering to mince words. "Jacob got the promotion. I've been here longer. I've outperformed him in every area. So tell me, how did this happen?" He cleared his throat, shifting uncomfortably in his chair. "Ava, I've been talking to senior management. Jacob's been showing potential. He's been improving, and I know you've been great, but they felt that Jacob had more to offer right now." Ava's frustration boiled over. "I've been here longer. I've consistently been the top performer in this department. I've put in the time, the effort. And now, this?" "I understand," Gordon said, his tone softening slightly. "But promotions aren't just about performance. It's about the direction the company is heading. Jacob's potential made him the right fit for the team moving forward." Ava's hands clenched at her sides. "I've been working for this company for almost a decade. I've proven myself. And you're telling me that he was the better choice? Because of potential?" Gordon looked uncomfortable, not meeting her eyes. "Ava, I wish I could say it was a clear-cut decision, but it's more complicated than that. Sometimes it's not just about who's the best performer. It's about the bigger picture." Ava stood, her patience worn thin. "I've worked harder than anyone here. I don't need you to tell me what the bigger picture is. What I need is for you to be honest. Is this because of my race?" Gordon hesitated, the words stuck in his throat. "Ava, it's not that simple." "Then why don't you just say it?" Ava's voice was sharp now. She turned and walked out of his office without another word. The conversation had confirmed what she had feared. It wasn't just about performance. It was about something deeper, something rooted in the systems that ran this company. The more she thought about it, the clearer it became. She had to do something. She couldn't let this go. Ava spent the next few days gathering evidence. She reached out to old colleagues, those who had moved on from the company. She pieced together stories of similar instances where people of color had been passed over for promotions in favor of less qualified white employees. It wasn't just her. It was a pattern. With a quiet resolve, Ava hired an attorney and began to prepare for a legal battle. One she knew wouldn't be easy, but one that was necessary. It wasn't just about her promotion. It was about something much bigger, dismantling the system of bias that had held her back for far too long. Ava Johnson had been with Lyndale Finance for almost a decade. From the beginning, she had proven herself to be an invaluable asset, working long hours, managing high-profile clients, and consistently outperforming her peers. She had earned the respect of her colleagues and superiors, always delivering results. So when the company announced a major promotion, Ava believed it was her time to shine. She was ready to step up, ready to take on more responsibility. But when Jacob Green, a colleague with far less experience, was announced as the new senior manager, Ava's world tilted. Jacob had been with the company for only 3 years, while Ava had been there for nearly a decade. She had earned every inch of her position, exceeding expectations, managing multi-million-dollar accounts, and leading teams. Jacob, on the other hand, had yet to demonstrate the same level of leadership or expertise. So how was he chosen over her? Ava sat frozen in the meeting room, watching as Jacob was congratulated by their colleagues. A proud smile spread across his face, and it only fueled her confusion and frustration. She had worked harder, given more, and earned every bit of recognition she had received. But now, in one swift move, everything she had worked for felt meaningless. She couldn't let this go. It wasn't just about the promotion, it was about the subtle forces that had kept her in the shadows. There were whispers she had overheard, the way some colleagues received opportunities while others, like her, were overlooked. Was this a mere coincidence? Or had her race played a part in it? After the meeting, she walked to the elevator, her mind racing. Jacob Green? The decision didn't make sense. She had always been the highest performer in her department, praised for her work ethic, her leadership, and her ability to close deals. But none of that seemed to matter. As the elevator descended, she realized this wasn't just about a promotion. It was about a system that had failed her, a system that favored people like Jacob, despite their lack of experience. Ava was no stranger to the corporate world. She had faced challenges, fought for recognition, and often had to work harder than others to prove herself. But today was different. This time, it wasn't just a matter of being overlooked. It was a matter of fairness. And Ava wasn't the kind of person to let this slide. The next day, Ava decided to confront her manager, Gordon Matthews, to get an explanation. Gordon had always been supportive in the past, praising her work and offering advice when needed. He was the one she trusted, and if anyone could offer some clarity, it was him. Ava, he greeted her warmly when she entered his office. But the tone of the meeting would be anything but warm. Ava wasted no time. Gordon, Jacob got the promotion. Can you explain that to me? Gordon shifted in his chair, clearly uncomfortable. Ava, I know this is tough. Jacob has been showing potential, and the leadership team felt he was the right fit for the role. Ava couldn't hold back her frustration. Potential? I've been here for almost a decade. I've exceeded expectations for years. How does someone with 3 years of experience get a role I've worked so hard for? Ava, I'm not saying you're not qualified. You're incredible at what you do, Gordon said, his voice soft. But promotions aren't always about who's been here the longest. It's about where the company is headed and who can drive us in that direction. Jacob is someone we feel can lead us forward. Ava stood up, her patience wearing thin. So, it's not about merit? It's about direction? I've been driving this company forward for years, Gordon. I've been carrying the weight of this department, and now I'm being told I don't fit the mold? Gordon's expression faltered, but he didn't reply. Ava could feel her frustration bubbling over. The more she thought about it, the more certain she became. This wasn't about merit or potential. It was about a system that overlooked her because of her race. She turned toward the door without another word. I can't do this anymore, she muttered under her breath. As Ava left Gordon's office, she knew she couldn't just walk away. She had worked too hard, sacrificed too much to let this slide. She spent the next several days digging into the company's history. She combed through old records, reached out to former employees, and started to uncover something that made her stomach turn: patterns of racial bias in hiring and promotion decisions. It wasn't just her being overlooked. It was a system built to favor others, those who didn't look like her. She hired a lawyer and began to build her case. This wasn't just about her promotion anymore. It was about dismantling the bias that had been allowed to fester in the company for years. She wasn't going to sit back and let this continue. Ava knew that she had to make a stand, not just for herself, but for everyone who had been treated the same way. The more she uncovered, the angrier she became. The system was rigged, and she had been a part of it, unknowingly playing by rules that didn't apply to her. She realized that if she was going to change anything, she had to confront it head on. And Ava was no stranger to confrontation. She wasn't backing down. She knew the road ahead would be tough. She'd face backlash, she'd be questioned, and she'd likely lose allies along the way. But Ava wasn't afraid. She had spent her entire career proving her worth in a world that had tried to make her invisible. This time, she was going to fight back, and she wasn't going to stop until things changed. Ava wasn't just fighting for her promotion. She was fighting for everyone who had ever been silenced, overlooked, or ignored. And she wasn't about to let the system win. The days after her conversation with Gordon felt slow. Ava couldn't shake the words he had used. Jacob has potential, and the company is heading in a different direction. She had spent years at Lyndale Finance, always striving to be the best, and now her dedication seemed to mean nothing. The promotion she had worked for was handed to Jacob Green, someone with far less experience. As she reflected on the meeting, Ava began to realize this wasn't about one decision. It was part of a larger pattern. This wasn't just about her promotion. It was about a system that had long been rigged. It wasn't just that Jacob was promoted over her. It was the entire corporate culture that allowed people like him to rise faster, while others, like her, were overlooked. Ava's frustration grew, but it wasn't until she reviewed her own history with the company that things started to click. She had been passed over for promotions before, each time with vague explanations or excuses. Each time, she had chalked it up to bad luck, but now she saw the truth. Her race was a factor. The company claimed to value hard work, but it clearly valued fit and potential more, qualities that had nothing to do with ability and everything to do with who someone knew, what they looked like, and where they fit into the existing mold. Determined to get answers, Ava hired Olivia Grant, a lawyer known for taking on big companies and winning. Olivia immediately began reviewing Lyndale's hiring and promotion history. They discovered that over the last 5 years, highly qualified employees of color were passed over for white employees with less experience. The evidence was subtle, but it was there. Patterns of discrimination masked by language like cultural fit and potential. The discovery was painful but not unexpected. Ava had suspected this for a long time, but now she had proof. The company, which had always presented itself as a meritocracy, was anything but. This wasn't just a few bad decisions. This was institutionalized bias that kept people like her from getting ahead. With Olivia's help, Ava filed a lawsuit against Lyndale Finance, citing racial discrimination in their promotion practices. She was no longer fighting just for herself, but for everyone who had been overlooked or pushed aside. She gathered evidence, spoke to former employees who had faced the same bias, and prepared for the legal battle ahead. As Ava's case progressed, she found herself more isolated than ever. Some colleagues who once admired her distanced themselves, uncomfortable with the growing tension. Others, like Gordon, tried to convince her to drop the lawsuit, urging her to think about her future at the company. But Ava wasn't interested in compromise anymore. She had spent too many years waiting for a fair shot, and it had never come. The legal proceedings weren't easy. The company's lawyers fought back fiercely, and the pressure took its toll on Ava. She was exhausted, mentally and physically drained from the constant back and forth. But through it all, she remained resolute. This wasn't just about a promotion. It was about tearing down a system that had been built to hold people like her back. One afternoon, Ava received a call from Gordon. His voice was hesitant, and she could tell he didn't want to have the conversation. "Ava," he began, "we need to talk about this lawsuit." I think you and I both know where this is headed, but I'm asking you, as someone who's worked with you for years, to consider dropping it." Ava stood up, pacing the room. "Consider dropping it?" she repeated. "Do you realize what's happening here, Gordon? I've been passed over for this promotion for years, and now I have to fight just to be treated fairly?" "I'm not saying you're wrong," Gordon said quickly. "But the company is big, Ava. You're not just going up against one decision, you're taking on a huge system. And it's not going to be easy. You're going to hurt your career if this goes public." Ava's pulse quickened. "I've already been hurt, Gordon, for years. If you can't see that, then maybe you don't understand what I've been fighting for all this time." There was a long pause before Gordon spoke again. "I'm just saying, there's more at stake here than just you. There's the future of this company, your career." "My career?" Ava cut him off, her voice rising. "My career has already been impacted. I'm not going to let it happen again. I'm fighting for more than just me. I'm fighting for everyone who's been overlooked, ignored, and told they weren't enough simply because of the color of their skin." Ava stood, staring at the window, her mind made up. "This isn't just about me anymore, Gordon. It's about all of us, and I'm not backing down." In the weeks that followed, Ava pushed forward with the lawsuit, gathering more evidence and speaking to others who had experienced similar treatment. She knew the path ahead would be difficult. There would be pushback, questions about her motives, and many people who wouldn't understand. But she also knew she couldn't stop now. She was done playing by a set of rules that didn't apply to her, done being the invisible worker whose contributions were ignored because of her race. At the same time, the media began picking up on the story. Ava's case, and her determination to expose the discrimination she faced, became a topic of conversation both within and outside the company. Lyndale Finance tried to downplay the situation, but the growing scrutiny made it impossible to ignore. Ava was no longer just fighting for herself. She was standing for all those who had been made to feel invisible, those who had been overlooked for promotion after promotion, their talents dismissed because they didn't fit into the company's outdated and biased view of success. By the time the company was forced to sit down for a public conversation about the case, Ava had already made her mark. She wasn't just the woman who was passed over for a promotion. She was a force to be reckoned with. She had sparked a conversation that the company could no longer avoid. As she prepared for the next phase of her battle, Ava knew the road ahead would be tough. But for the first time in her life, she felt empowered, not just by her position at the company, but by the truth she was about to reveal. The lawsuit was in full swing, and Ava felt the weight of it daily. Lyndale Finance had hired one of the best legal teams money could buy, pushing back at every turn. The company's PR machine went into overdrive, denying the discrimination Ava had exposed and branding her lawsuit as frivolous. They claimed Jacob's promotion was purely about business needs, not race. But the media caught wind of the case, and Ava's story began to spread. Headlines like "Black Woman Sues for Fair Promotion" and "Racial Bias Allegations Shake Corporate World" appeared everywhere. The attention was overwhelming. Messages of support poured in from across the country: women of color, young professionals, people who had experienced the same frustrations. They saw Ava as a symbol of resistance, someone willing to challenge the status quo. But the pressure was mounting. Some colleagues who had once admired Ava began distancing themselves. Others questioned her motives. Was she just trying to destroy the company? Or was she truly fighting for change? Ava's workday was consumed by meetings with her lawyer, Olivia Grant, who was spearheading the case. Olivia was a seasoned attorney who had taken on corporate giants before, and her expertise was invaluable. Together, they scoured records, finding clear patterns of racial discrimination in hiring and promotions. Former employees stepped forward, sharing their stories of being passed over for promotions while less qualified White colleagues were fast-tracked. Ava wasn't surprised, but seeing it laid out in black and white was a harsh reminder of the uphill battle she faced. At the same time, Ava began to feel more isolated. The constant barrage of legal meetings, media attention, and personal attacks was draining. She was determined, but there were moments when doubt crept in. Was it worth it? Was she just opening herself up for more pain and disappointment? But then she remembered why she started this fight. She wasn't just fighting for her promotion, she was fighting for everyone who had been denied the same opportunities. She was fighting for change. One afternoon, Ava received an unexpected message. Vivian Hayes, the CEO of Hayes Global Investments, a major shareholder in Lyndale Finance, wanted to meet. Ava's heart skipped a beat. Vivian was one of the most powerful women in the industry, and her company's influence could be the tipping point in the lawsuit. Ava had never expected Vivian to reach out to her, but now, her support could change everything. When they met, Vivian didn't mince words. "I know what you're trying to do, Ava," she said, her voice calm but firm. "And I respect that you're standing up for what you believe in. But you have to understand, the people running this company are deeply entrenched in a system that's not going to change overnight." Ava nodded. She had been fighting against this system for months, and she knew how deeply ingrained the biases were, but she wasn't backing down. "I don't want to change it overnight. I want to change it permanently," Ava replied. "This isn't just about one promotion. It's about the culture that keeps people like me from getting ahead. I've worked too hard to just walk away." Vivian studied her for a moment before speaking again. "I admire your determination, Ava. But you need to understand, the system doesn't want to change. The people in power won't just give it up because you ask." Ava's resolve only strengthened. "I'm not asking. I'm demanding it. This isn't just about me. This is for everyone who's been overlooked, who's been told they weren't enough, just because of the way they look." Vivian was silent for a moment, then nodded. "I'll support you. But it's going to be a long road. You have to be ready for that." With Vivian's support, Ava's case gained even more attention. The pressure on Lyndale Finance grew, and the company had no choice but to act. They agreed to a full internal audit, promising to review their hiring and promotion policies. They also committed to launching a diversity and inclusion initiative across the firm. While Ava knew these steps were just the beginning, they were a victory in themselves. But the fight wasn't over. Ava's legal team continued to dig into the company's practices, uncovering even more evidence of racial bias. There was a pattern to how certain employees, those who fit the company's idea of success, were promoted, while others, like Ava, were held back despite their qualifications. As the case progressed, Ava began to feel the weight of her newfound role. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for the future of everyone who would come after her. She began speaking at events, sharing her story, and encouraging others to stand up against the systems that held them back. The response was overwhelming. People reached out to her, sharing their own experiences, thanking her for starting the conversation. The spotlight was uncomfortable at times, but Ava knew it was necessary. It wasn't just about her. It was about making sure the future was different for those who came after her. She was changing the system, one step at a time. The legal battle raged on for months, but the company was feeling the pressure. The more Ava spoke out, the more difficult it became for Lyndale Finance to maintain its old ways. Finally, after much negotiation, the company agreed to a settlement. They publicly acknowledged the racial discrimination in their practices and committed to real change. Ava was given the promotion she had been denied, but more importantly, she had helped create the momentum needed to change the company's culture. Ava's victory wasn't just a personal one, it was a victory for anyone who had ever been passed over, dismissed, or ignored because of their race. It was a reminder that sometimes the hardest battles were the ones that didn't just change one life, but the lives of many. As she walked into her new office on the first day of her promotion, Ava couldn't help but smile. She had fought for this, and now it was finally hers. But the work wasn't over. The fight for equality was a never-ending one. Ava knew that her journey was just beginning, and she was ready to continue the fight, this time with even more support behind her. Ava's victory was bittersweet. Lyndale Finance had agreed to promote her, publicly acknowledging their racial discrimination in promotions and committing to overhaul their policies. The company had promised diversity training, a transparent promotion process, and internal audits. Ava had won, but the real battle was just beginning. In her new senior manager role, Ava felt the weight of her responsibility. The office was divided. Some colleagues were supportive, while others resented the changes she represented. Ava knew she had to prove that her promotion wasn't just a symbolic gesture, it was a sign of real change. Ava quickly set to work. She pushed for company-wide diversity training, mandatory for all levels, and advocated for a clearer, merit-based promotion process. She met with employees to gather feedback, learning that many, especially people of color, had experienced discrimination. She knew she couldn't let these voices go unheard. Despite resistance from senior leaders, Ava didn't back down. She worked with HR to implement the changes, starting with mandatory training on unconscious bias. As time passed, more employees of color began to take on leadership roles, and the promotion process became more transparent. Ava's efforts weren't without personal cost. The legal battle had drained her, and she felt the weight of being one of the few people of color in positions of power at the company. But she wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for everyone who had been silenced by the system. In the months following the changes, the company's culture started to shift. It wasn't perfect, but the progress was undeniable. Ava was finally able to breathe, but she knew there was more work to be done. Beyond the workplace, Ava's personal growth blossomed. She began therapy to heal from the emotional toll of years of discrimination, learning that her value wasn't tied to her career. For the first time, Ava allowed herself space to rest, to stop constantly hustling to prove her worth. Her story began to inspire others. Ava was invited to speak at conferences on diversity and inclusion, using her platform to call for continued change. But she didn't stop there. Ava's success story was just the beginning of a much larger movement. She had won her battle, but the fight for equality. Vivian was silent for a moment, then nodded. "I'll support you. But it's going to be a long road. You have to be ready for that." Ava had become more than just a senior manager. She had become a voice for those who had been overlooked. The systems that kept people like her from rising hadn't disappeared, but Ava had proven that change was possible, and she wasn't stopping until it was complete. Ava stood in her new office, looking out over the city skyline. She had fought for this, but it wasn't just about her. It was about breaking the cycle of inequality that had plagued Lyndale Finance for years. The company had made promises, and though the road ahead was still long, real change had begun. Her promotion was no longer a symbol of personal success. It was a symbol of something greater, the power of persistence, the power of standing up when the system works against you. But Ava knew the fight wasn't over. The changes she had fought for were just the beginning. She received messages of support from across the country, women of color, young professionals, those who had endured the same struggles. Ava had become their voice, their advocate, and she would continue to be. The world was watching, and she would not let the momentum fade. Her journey had reshaped her own view of success. Ava had learned to value herself beyond the work she did, to take time to heal, to rest. She was no longer driven by the need to prove herself. She was driven by the need to make a lasting difference. The road ahead was still uncertain, but Ava was ready. She had started something that couldn't be undone, and as she looked ahead, she knew one thing for sure. Her fight had only just begun.